as everyone knows, I love beer. And so we're doing another beer podcast. And we are going to review a few as we go through. Byron from Mariner Brewing, thanks so much for coming on. I am pretty pumped, obviously, to drink beer, but also learn about Mariner.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Tell us what we're drinking right now.
Yeah, so we've just cracked into one of Mariner's Orion Premium Lager. So this is beer we make year-round. It's basically a Helles lager. We don't call it exactly a Helles lager because it's slightly too hoppy to be a Helles. But yeah, it's like a nice, crushable, refreshing lager, brewed for the West Coast, meant to be, brewed and drank all year. It's, pretty like malty, but not too sweet. Pretty mild overall in flavor. And then it's got this nice kind of like zesty, slightly fruity hop character from Mandarina hops.
You said a Helles lager? Mm-hmm. What does that mean?
So it's a German style of lager, and this is brewed kind of, similar to that. So it's usually got a bit of sweetness to it, less bitterness than a Pilsner, so it won't be, like quite as hoppy as Pilsner. Although these days everyone's making Pilsners that are like not that hoppy, because it sounds cool. But yeah, so this we don't call a Helles because it's not exactly a Helles. But yeah, we call it premium lager. It's like all Canadian malt lager. And then we use Mandarina and Tradition hops, which are kind of like fruity, but like fairly subtle still.
Yeah. A lot of brewery people talk about the gateway beer into craft beer.
Yeah.
Would you classify this as one of those, like trying to convert those like 50, 60-year-olds who grew up on Budweiser and Canadian?
Yeah, definitely. So, we sell more of this in our tasting room than anywhere else. It's really popular in our tasting room. It's really good beer all around, but... yeah, it's definitely like a gateway kind of beer. Mm-hmm. We do have a lot of people come into the brewery and say like, what do you have? That's like a lager, and we have this lager.
Yeah.
So that is why we brewed it. We used to make a cream ale that was kind of similar, but really the lager, I think it's more approachable for a lot of reasons, and it's this one's tastier beer as well.
I almost grew up the opposite in terms of my beer drinking experiences. Is like. Mm-hmm. Budweiser and Canadian, I thought were disgusting growing up. Mm-hmm. And so now to understand that taste profiles of lagers can be different than a Budweiser and Canadian. So I'm almost getting into these types of beers more in the last year or so. Almost mentally, I would see a lager on a menu and just be like, I'm staying away from that.
Yeah,
kind
it
of
sounds
thing.
boring. Yeah.
But there's so much you can do with this beer, it seems like. Mm-hmm. And this is like, it's interesting to hear you describe it as a little bit more fruity, a little bit sweeter, mm-hmm. which maybe is something that I like, but like it just has it seems so much more complex than like something like a Budweiser.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, yeah, that's exactly what we're going for is right. Like what tastes kind of like a Budweiser, but like way better and has all that stuff that like a Budweiser is clearly missing.
Totally.
Do you describe it that way? Like, yeah, it sounds like I think we've accomplished that.
I could talk about it for a while. I could talk about beer for a while. Just like every sip, you almost like pick up on something a little bit differently. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot going on here. Before we get into Mariner and the backstory and how you got into beer, mm-hmm. I want to hear your opinion of BC craft beer in terms of like who is doing things the right way. And you can't say Mariner because I know you're going to be biased.
That'll be assumed, we'll say, and we won't exactly. Talk about that. Yeah.
Other than Mariner. So in terms of like two main categories I see from a consumer point of view in craft beer is one, branding. Mm-hmm. If you have a phenomenal brand, it's going to stand out and people are going to buy your beer.
Yeah.
Even if it's like mediocre, labels on shelves that stand out.
Yeah.
Sell beer. Mm-hmm. And then two, like the actual product that you're selling. So I want to hear from your opinion, and you're allowed to have favorites. Mm-hmm. It's not like you're a dad with 6 kids and you like my parents and you don't have favorites. You're allowed to have a favorite in BC craft beer.
Yeah.
But who's doing things well, or who do you look up to in terms of branding?
In terms of branding. So, I mean, I definitely look at different breweries for different things. Mm-hmm. I think that, it's kind of generic maybe to say, but like everyone has their strengths, but like it's true. So, I don't look at any one brewery for everything. Yeah. In terms of branding, I think from the beginning and to this day, Fieldhouse has been doing an amazing job. Mm-hmm. Josh is like very skilled and very great at executing things, and just an excellent designer. So, we really look to them for branding, social media, like really tying everything together as well. Like literally just last week we went to their tasting room to see what new food they had and stuff.
Totally.
Also Yeah, I mean, well, like a lot. I mean, there's really a lot of I mean, a lot of great brands. It's like I'm not gonna have time to mention them all, but like Four Winds we look at quite a bit as well. Strathcona is always doing interesting things. Steel and Oak. I really love all their new seasonals. I used to not pay as much attention to their core lineup because I was like, oh, it's all lagers and like I'm more interested in IPAs and stuff, and like that's kind of how we run our stuff. But really, yeah, what they've been doing with their new seasonals has really impressed me. Like this summer, I had like several beers where I was like, holy cow! Like I'm shocked they can do those core classic beers so well as these seasonals so well.
Totally.
And then how they all tie it together, like with the brand, like it just flows so well.
I'm obviously super close with them just because my business affiliation with Steel and Oak. And so I know their beer better than any other brewery's beer in BC, but I'm super impressed with them in the last year or so. Like you said, when they started 5 years ago, I thought their beer was pretty good, but kind of, they didn't really go outside the box that they were in.
Yeah.
And now they've been doing a ton of creative stuff, which I love. And a lot of other breweries are doing. So maybe that's just kind of like a trend in beers to do a little bit more one-offs, do more seasonals, keep those core 3 or 4 that you do throughout the year, but do a lot more seasonal stuff. So it's interesting that you mentioned them. I don't know Fieldhouse that well, and maybe it's just because it's Abbotsford, and it doesn't seem like out here in Burnaby, Vancouver, you see them in liquor stores as much. And maybe that's just because I'm not looking for them, so I don't know them.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. Like I mean, in what I mentioned them about, really looking up to them in terms of branding and stuff. I, to be honest, don't drink all that many of their products. Like I think I probably have had maybe 3 or 4 in the last year.
Okay.
But yeah, really in terms of, and I mean, their beers are great. Don't get me wrong. But there's only so much beer I can drink. But yeah, it's really in terms of like the social media, on-site experience, like merchandise, just everything ties together so well and is so like engaging. Like whenever I see their posts, like I read the whole caption, so I'm like, this is interesting, and it's worded in a really cool way, and like, and then that ties right into like the stories or like what's happening like there that day. So really like the whole kind of cohesive brand experience. I think they do exceptionally well. To your point about like breweries doing a lot of new things. Talking about the beer industry, I think you can't not talk about how like kind of everything's gone bonkers a bit in terms of like the number of SKUs. Sorry, I say number of SKUs, that's like an industry term, but like the number of new products people are coming out with, and sometimes all the different formats they're in as well. And like, there's just so much like experimentation and also like new stuff happening in beer. It's pretty interesting time to be both in beer and also like to be a beer consumer, seeing everything that's coming out.
I ask this question a lot to brewery people, but how much of what you do is like wanting to be creative in your own brand and versus staying on trend in what is popular in the industry right now or consumers right now?
Yeah, I think we really try and do both at the same time. Like really, I think the brand is more kind of like something that we layer onto everything we do to make sure that like everything has to be on brand. We can't like, even if we wanted to, couldn't make a beer that was like really good or something we wanted to do, but like it just doesn't make sense to our customers, right? If they walk in and they're like, is that a guest tap? Or like, where did that come from, right? So everything has to be kind of like the brand layered over that. But then within that, of course, like we're a brewery, we're, essentially, a really like kind of, I don't know how to put this, but like, on a basic level, like an interesting kind of like, manufacturer that has like some kind of, like social excitement around it. But like really we're a manufacturer, we want to make stuff, we want to sell it. So, we look at like, what do we want to drink? What do customers want to drink? And then how would Mariner do this? And then, we figure out how our brand can make these cool hazy IPAs that are delicious and, hopefully some of the best ones out there, and also like fit in with everything else we're doing.
People talk about, of course, you need to make a product that people are going to buy and enjoy. What do you do much in terms of like field research, I guess would be the kind of term, but in terms of like talking to people as they're in the brewery, saying like, what do you like and don't like about this beer? If you could change something about it, would you would you make it less bitter? Would you make it more sweet? Whatever.
Yeah, I'd say, we do a lot of...
Or is it more just like, this beer sold really well, so we need to do more stuff like this?
It's pretty multifaceted, I would say.
Yeah.
So like definitely, yeah, like how fast something sells is like
Totally.
pretty good indication of like how popular it is, how, you know, how good it is, you know, to some degree. But also, yeah, like people's opinion of something and like their perception of it is, you know, just as important as what it actually is. So we talk to a lot of people like in our tasting room. We're kind of constantly talking about beer with the team and like the brewers, all the, you know, the tasting room team members. Yeah, so we really, I don't know, we kind of, I would say, slowly coalesce like an idea of what the next beer should be and what, you know, it should taste like and not taste like. And it's pretty collaborative. Like it takes a while to come up with stuff and yeah, to have everyone kind of like on the same page about like, you know, what it should be like. And if they're not on the same page, at least like understanding how people got there.
Totally. So you mentioned Fieldhouse for someone who you look up to branding wise. Who do you look up to beer wise? Who's doing cool things right now with beer?
There's a lot of breweries. Let me see here. Who stood out to me recently? Well, like I said, yeah, Steel and Oak this summer. I had a few of their seasonals. They're very well put together. Yeah. In addition to being like interesting ideas and coolly branded, like just really well balanced beers. Yeah, I mean, I do really like a lot of stuff that Twin Sails puts out too. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't try quite as many beers as I like to. I often see something on social and be like, I should pick up a bottle of that. And then like a month later, I'm actually in a liquor store that might have stocked it and it's gone. So, yeah. There's really too many breweries to mention. Like Four Winds continues to make amazing beer. Like there's new projects like Temporal Beers making like delicious stuff. And
who's that one?
Temporal.
Where's that?
So they're in Vancouver. They're based out of Lupulo. I believe they still are. But it's basically like a all barrel aged project, but like very experimental, cool. Like, yeah, kind of lots of mixed cultures and stuff. So, yeah, there's a lot of development going on. It really kind of depends what you're looking for. I mean, like with Mariner, yeah, we definitely look at like, you know, what is Twin Sails and Superflux doing, you know, because like people look to them for IPAs, which means like they then, you know, they're kind of expected to be on the cutting edge. So, you know, knowing what they're doing is like pretty important. And then, yeah, I mean, like Four Winds, like for, I mean, kind of everything they do, and Steel and Oak, yeah, for a lot of the like more classic styles and also seasonals.
I was thinking of something today in terms of just like topics of where to take this conversation. One of the things I was thinking about is when I turned 19, I started bartending, and I bartended for like 5 years in just a random neighborhood pub. One in Poco, one in Burnaby. And it was kind of like socially unacceptable to go out for beer at lunch. You know what I mean? And that was only like, I don't know, 10 years ago. And now with the emergence of this crazy craft beer industry, it almost seems like beer is super socially acceptable now. I don't know where I'm going with this, but it's just like, it's cool to see such a crazy transition because I love beer and I don't know anything about brewing it. You know way more about that than me. But in terms of like the creativity, the imagination, and just how many different flavor profiles you can put together with different ingredients, I think is so cool. Yeah. And I love just experimenting. Like I'm that guy that'll walk into a liquor store and be like, oh, I've never seen this label before. I'll try that one. I'm not going to go back to something. Well, I will too, but like most of the time I just want to try a bunch of new stuff to get those different flavors. But it's crazy to see how quickly something like beer can go from like, oh, that would be weird. Why would you go to a sports bar at lunchtime? To like, oh, sweet, you're going to Mariner Brewing? I'll come with you. Yeah. Right? It's just kind of cool to see the transition.
It has happened super fast. Yeah. Something that I, like, I guess a fact I came across recently. So Mariner opened just over 2 years ago now, or 2 years and 2 months. And when we opened, there was just over 100 breweries in BC. And I remember people like talking about it, making it a big thing when there's 100 breweries in BC. Cause like, that's really a lot, you know, BC's not that big. And then now in the 2 years since we opened, there's now over 200 breweries in BC. So it's doubled in just 2 years. Yeah, it's really, I was shocked when I read it. But so, you know, magazines like The Growler that, you know, like catalog all of them have like, there's twice as many now. It's pretty wild. So yeah, there's an enormous amount of beer out there. And I think that's really helped drive like the cultural shift, right? Like when you can go out and like have fun, try like 8 different beers at a place that's like not that rowdy. You know, there's just kind of like good atmosphere, good intentions behind it. Like it's really about like trying new things and, you know, hanging out with your friends and it's kind of easy to see how it drove that shift so quickly, even though it's only been like really 5 years since things have exploded. But yeah, it's pretty neat. At the same time, I think we'll see it change a lot in the next few years too, right? Like, for example, you're saying, kind of just starting to like get more into lagers or like appreciate lagers. I think there's going to be a big shift, maybe, I wouldn't say away from like things like fruit sours and IPAs, like they're here to stay. But, I think right now people just want everything turned up to 11. But like at some point we'll just say like, what's like a more regular beer, like what's something with more subtle flavor. And I think that'll kind of be a big change over the next
Do you think
few
that's
years.
next?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, people have been saying for a while, like lagers are going to come back around. I think it's due pretty soon.
Mm-hmm. Just lagers or pilsners, lagers, like that?
No,
kind
yeah,
of
that
flavor
stuff.
profile?
I think we'll also start to see like more like lighter beverages. Like I think of like Four Winds, like featherweight IPA being like pretty ahead of its time. I think it's going to do great over the next few years because it's like still full flavored and interesting, but it's like, yeah, a bit more subtle, a bit lighter, less kind of in your face. Yeah. Like this one's got pastries in it or like whatever the new thing is.
Yeah. Isn't that one lower alcohol content too?
It is, yeah. And
It's
I think
like
people
4.5
appreciate
or
that too,
something?
right? Because
Yeah.
then if you could have like 2 different beers in a day instead of one real strong one, well, like that's cool too. You can try different things. So
Totally. That was one of the things I was going to ask you, is just like trends. And so for me, since I've been into craft beer, which has maybe been 5 years, it's gone from like the overpowering like double hopped IPAs that are like 90, 100, 110 IBUs to sours for a couple of years. And now it's like this crazy hazy trend, but it seems like it's kind of dying out. Like everyone's done the hazies and it's almost like what's next kind of thing.
yeah, exactly.
So it's interesting to hear you, your thoughts being like the more subtle flavored stuff like lagers.
Yeah, I think it's starting to come out a bit already. Like I noticed it this month, basically, like a lot of breweries would typically do like a pumpkin beer or pumpkin spice beer. Still, there's quite a few of those out there, but I've noticed more and more this year for October time, people did, including Mariner, actually, we have it, we're getting it on Thursday, is like a Vienna lager or like Oktoberfest lager. So it's like still seasonably appropriate, still delicious craft beer that like probably has interesting flavors people haven't tried. But instead of like, like throw pumpkin in it, throw spice in it, it's more like a more regular beer, and it's a bit easier to like, more approachable, and like just kind of dialed back a bit to something more like normal instead of over the top. So
Totally.
yeah.
Carl, what's your favorite kind of beer?
Like you, I was in love with the hazies, the strong hazies. I was all over that. I still am.
Yeah.
Me too. I found one in the liquor store today that I hadn't seen before, so I grabbed it.
Yeah. What is it?
It's in there. You can go look. I think it's a Stanley Park. I don't know. I've had most of them.
Have you had
Drink more beer than I care to
Odyssey
admit.
IPA? Yeah.
I haven't.
Cool.
And
Okay.
I think we should need to open that one.
Yeah, sounds good.
Do you want to try this one? Go grab it. Is this the new one?
Yeah,
This is the one that's your...
no, that's a new one. That's a September release. Yeah, so we have our Polaris Northeast IPA that we make year round. It's like a 7.5% really tropical hazy IPA. And then we made this Odyssey IPA. So it has, it's like 6 or so different hops in it. It's a bit lighter in color, a bit less sweet, more like citrusy, a bit floral hops. So it's pretty interesting, really hazy, super hoppy. It's the first beer we dry hopped 3 times. So it's triple dry hopped, which just helps get like more flavor, more haze, more aroma.
What does that process look like?
It looks like our brewer Jeff, with a big old bucket of hops, like a 5-gallon Home Depot bucket filled like half or more full, usually climbing up a ladder, opening a port on the top and pouring them in, and then closing the lid before it all foams up.
And so how long are they in there?
So they're in there at different times. So one of the new techniques that brewers are using with hazy IPAs. So do you know what dry hopping is? Well, for the audience, anyone who doesn't know, it's basically hopping, like putting hops into a beer that's already been brewed, so it's now fermenting. So it's like room temperature or colder, and they're often done just a few days before packaging. So what we do with our dry hopping is we'll often put hops in the day we brew the beer. So like right at the very beginning with the yeast, and then like 4 or 5 days later, we'll dry hop again. And then 3 or 4 days later, we'll dry hop again. So that just helps, basically get more aroma out of it. Yeast will kind of do different things depending when you put the hops in. So
It smells florally.
Yeah. So the main hop in this beer is Cashmere. Also has Cascade, Columbus, Centennial, Bravo. Probably something else I'm forgetting.
How many different types of hops are there?
There's so many. There's like 100. Whenever the brewers are like looking at the recipes or adjusting them, they have these sheets with like lab printouts of like the different like oils and stuff that are in the hops, like limonene and myrcene and like whatever. Like limonene's the one that smells like lemons and stuff. And they look at like different percents, and they can be like, this hop is like partly like this hop combined with this hop. And then they're like, oh, great. So we'll substitute that for this hop. So it's like, it's really crazy like how complex it gets and how many varieties are out there. Like, I don't know how the brewers do it. Like it takes like decades, I think, to really like have a great grasp of like what hops will do to beer.
I don't even know where to begin with that. Like thousands, probably.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah, and there's new ones coming out all the time, too.
I love beer so much. There's just so much to know, Carl.
That's actually crazy.
It is crazy.
There's new hops coming out all the time?
Yeah,
like,
so...
like crossbreeding and all that stuff?
Exactly, yeah. So I think right now a lot of the big ones are coming out of like New Zealand and Australia. There's a few new German ones I heard people talking about this year. And then like, you probably heard of the hops like Citra and Mosaic. They're like two of the most popular ones. Yeah. Those... I don't know exactly when they came out, but they really got big just in the last like 10 years.
Do brewers make mistakes? You're saying there's a lot of like trial and error with this stuff and saying like, oh, that sounds like it would be good with that. And then they put it together and you try it. You're like, ooh.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, it's, it's making food and sometimes it doesn't turn out, you could burn a cake and you can do weird things to beer too. So yeah, definitely. Mistakes can happen.
I guess when you're planning a new beer, is the recipe experimented with on a small scale?
Yeah, so we have a pretty structured process. The way we do it typically is we have like weekly meetings. So we call them beer development meetings, and we talk about like new beers we're developing. And then we have what we call, so basically we come up with ideas there. We like, maybe come up with 5 ideas, pare it down to 1 or 2, decide which ones we're going to like move forward in the process. And then we have what we call an exploratory batch program, where we basically do like a 100-liter brew, which is like 2 kegs. That's like a pretty small amount for a brewery of our size. They'd be on tap for just a few days. So we'll come up with a recipe. We'll sometimes do some like small scale trials first, like 1 or so liters, just kind of trying to get an idea of the flavors. Then we'll brew the 100-liter batch, sell that in the tasting room, get feedback from customers, kind of look at like how fast it sold, that sort of thing. And then make any adjustments we want to make. And at that point, we either like scrap it because it, didn't go great, or we, make any adjustments and then move it on to full scale production. So, now we're putting out about 3 new beers a month. So we've kind of developed, like, initially it was like, how about this? And I guess we should test batch that. And it tastes good enough. Let's make it. But, like over the, a few years, we've kind of got it more regimented. So now, we have this organized process where we can like turn out three new recipes a month.
What's the craziest idea you've seen in one of those meetings that you were just like, no, that's not going to work?
A bunch of savory beers. After Twin Sails did the lobster thing, we kept talking about like, what about like, I don't know, like saltine crackers, or that one's not very interesting. But like, what about like, like savory pies, like chicken pot pie beer or something. But like, I just don't think they're going to fly. I think savory beers probably just wouldn't taste good. I don't know.
We had one of the owners from, what was the Abbotsford Brewery? I don't know why
his name was Kevin.
Silver Valley.
Silver Valley. Yeah.
We had Kevin from Silver Valley on, and so I have them on Instagram, and I was watching some of their stories recently, and I think they threw a pecan pumpkin pie into one of the like whatever kegs or whatever.
Yeah.
So I guess that's savory type of idea, just throwing stuff in there.
Yeah.
How creative can the brewers get with that kind of stuff?
I'd say as creative as they want to be. The only thing that like, we just kind of limit the scale they do it on, right? Sure. So if they want to do something that like probably isn't going to taste good, but might taste really good, like 1 in 1,000 chance or something, we'll just get like brew a really small batch, make like 5 liters just in case it's not good. Yeah. But really, I definitely like, we are always trying to come up with new ideas and really just like make tasty different things. So we don't want to like throw out any ideas or like not experiment.
Isn't it crazy how obviously with this boom of craft beer, the education system around craft beer has grown so much too. Like multiple colleges are offering 4-year degrees in brewing.
Yeah.
Which is pretty crazy. So in terms of like hiring people, what type of education is, if any, are you looking for in brewers?
Yeah.
Is it more experience?
I'd say it's kind of like the whole package. Like it's definitely a mix of experience and education. Like I would say either experience or education is kind of required.
Sure.
And if not, then like definitely like a really knockout attitude and work ethic. Like we're a really small business. We only have like 8 or 10 employees. So really, like ideally someone who kind of has worked in small business really helps us a lot. But in terms of education for our brewers, education or experience, like one of our brewers recently graduated from the Coquitlam program, which I would say prepared him extremely well for working in our production brewery. Whereas our head brewer, Kevin, doesn't have formal brewing training, but has like more than a decade of experience making beer and being a head brewer for most of that. So that also works really well.
How was that guy that went to the Coquitlam program? How was his experience there? Because I've heard mixed reviews on it based on like, teaches you a lot about the science behind brewing beer, but it's not a lot in terms of practical knowledge of how to actually run a brewery day to day and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So he knows a ton of stuff, and I think had a good found the schooling to be well organized and learned a lot of stuff and things. We did find, and he did find that some of the practical stuff it's just kind of like it. A lot of brewing depends on scale. So like he had worked, or their practical stuff was in like 100 and 200 liter sizes, which is like, you imagine like a big soup pot. Like most people kind of have an intuitive idea of like how heavy that's going to be, roughly like how to handle it maybe. Whereas the stuff we're dealing with is like 4,000 or 5,000 liters, and it's often at like, medium pressures, like 30 PSI and stuff like that can blast things really fast. So like that kind of thing, I think maybe they don't get into as much. So like we just had to train them a lot on like the safety of like handling like 100-pound hoses full of hot water and kind of things like that don't relate to the science at all.
Right.
Or they kind of do if you like think of the pressures and stuff. But like, it takes a bit of time to get used to working like kind of big scales. Like it's kind of weird, but like there's like our brewing tanks are basically like a 17-foot tall cylinder of liquid, and you can stand like right beside it, and it can be at like freezing temperatures and like, 2 atmospheres of pressure. Like it's kind of bizarre. Like it can be dangerous, certainly. So you have to just be really careful and thoughtful about that kind of stuff. But but I think the brewing program is great, but I think it might everyone would probably who goes into it would benefit from like practical training as well, like getting a summer job or something.
Is there any like intern portion of that degree? I guess not.
I don't think so. Yeah, they have like an on-site brewery, but like I said, it's kind of on the small scale. So we did hire Jeff, our brewer. I think it was like in between semesters. So he was with us last summer as well before he had finished school, and that worked really well. So
Cool. Let's chat about the beginning of Mariner.
Yeah. Okay.
You kind of took a 180 in terms of a career.
Yeah, I guess so.
Going from, well, I'm probably going to say this wrong. Was it surveying in like the mining industry?
Sort of. It was, I worked for the government of Canada, and it was specifically as the Canadian Environmental Assessment Agency, which is this like relatively small agency of like 80 or 100 people. Maybe it's a bit bigger, that like does these 2 to 5 year reviews of like really major projects. So these are like multi-billion-dollar projects, usually mines is mostly what I worked on. And, you can imagine like a project that big, they're like in the middle of northern BC somewhere, and they're basically like digging up mountains and things like that. Like they're just like crazy big. And, in doing that, they can, like harm things like salmon habitat or like air quality for local residents, or like, hunting grounds for, like either recreational or indigenous people like hunting and stuff. So there's kind of a lot of stuff that has to be considered in doing that. So this agency would, there's basically a law that says that, people doing these projects, and there's like a list of what the projects are, have to submit these like super complex reviews. So the mining companies would go do like 4 years of study in like the middle of the wilderness or whatever. And then they would submit to us these like literal like 2,000 to 3,000 page documents about like the various topics. So in total, they're like 20 or 30,000 page documents. And then we have like a team of people that like reviews them and like basically tells them like, okay, you can like, there's all the, I don't know, it ends up basically being like how does it work? Like, it's basically a 100-page report. A minister makes a decision on whether the project should go through, and then usually it goes through, but there's conditions. So basically it ends up, the gist of it for the mining company, for example, would be like, you can do your mine, you can drive your trucks and everything, but you can only do it like until midnight each day, and your trucks can't go more than like 40 kilometers an hour because there's too much dust, and like you have to like make a salmon hatchery to fix up salmon habitat, things like that. So it really kind of gets into the nitty gritty of it. So it was it was like these big long projects that we would work on, and it was really interesting, important stuff. I feel really connected to the outdoors, feel really grateful to live on the west coast of Canada. So I felt like it was important work we were doing, but at the same time it takes years, and it's so dry, and it's like sometimes I'd read 300-page fish report like 4 times over looking for like details and stuff, and like it's just crazy. So so that was my previous life up to a few years ago, before I got into making beer.
Were you one of those dudes that was just sitting around having a casual beer with a buddy saying like, we should do this, we should start a brewery? Because I've been that guy before.
Yeah, basically. My friends and I used to go down. First we started by going into Vancouver. I remember when Craft Beer Market opened up, that was like our go-to place. It was great because like where else could you get like all the new beers, like really good food, like pretty cool location. So we would go down there and just talk about like, I wonder like what's new with this beer and what is this brewery doing? And like, I tried that one from them last week and stuff like that. So yeah, we had those exact conversations. I think that was probably like 6 years ago before I really kind of got into things. And it kind of went from there. I saw Yellow Dog pop up in Port Moody, and that's really kind of what I guess made it stick with me, that like this was going to come to the Tri-Cities too, and just like BC and the suburbs in general.
Totally. Was Yellow Dog was the first one in Port Moody?
By like a month or so. Moody Ales was like basically the same time.
And they're what, 5 years old ish?
I think they just turned 5 this summer. Okay. I think June or so.
So obviously the concept is brewing. How do you turn it from just crazy idea in your head into what it is today? Or even just like, what is the first step in the process of, hey, I think this would be really cool to bring a brewery to the Tri-Cities.
Yeah.
What's next?
So I would say the next step, I mean, there's kind of a few things obviously there's like stuff happening at the same time, but like really for me, the next step was to kind of like try and form a picture of like, what would this look like? Like if let's say, everything goes according to plan, a few years from now, we're going to open a successful brewery in Coquitlam somewhere. What kind of beer are we serving? How much of it? Like how big is this operation? Like just trying to define like some of that like kind of key stuff of like, is it really small in my garage? Is it like Molson size or like, it's somewhere in between probably. Yeah. So like kind of how big and what kind of beers, who are our customers? Like, so really I think I just like start on my phone writing down some notes. Like, I think it would be maybe this big. And, I was at Yellow Dog last week and they had like this many customers sitting there and like, it seems like about this big. So stuff like that. And I'm kind of a numbers guy. So like I basically started building this spreadsheet of like, how much does beer cost to make? And like answering some of these questions that I myself was wondering. Like I'd homebrewed for several years. So I knew like kind of the basics of like the equipment maybe and like the process a bit. But yeah, I didn't know much about commercial brewing. So we were just trying to pin down all those kind of, decisions, I guess, or like in terms of what it would look like. And then once I had an idea of like, what was important and kind of what some of the key factors might be, then we tried to find a space, which took a while, and then tried to find a brewer, found money, got equipment, all that. So
what was it always going to be Coquitlam?
Pretty much. Yeah. We like kind of loosely looked at like Brewers Row at one point, and then also like Port Coquitlam. But yeah, really Coquitlam made the most sense to me. I grew up just at the top of Mariner Way in Coquitlam, and I really knew the area. I knew like what the city's plans were like for the city center over the next like several years. So, it kind of made the most sense to me. And I wanted to do something, rather than be like another brewery on Brewers Row. Like they've been very successful, and we wanted to do something different and saw it as more of an opportunity to be in our own city.
What types of things did you want to do differently?
I mean, it really came down to the beer. I'm a strong believer that it should. Like looking at like the liquid, as we might call it, that's around. At the time, there wasn't a ton of hazy IPAs, and I knew that they were going to blow up, and I thought like, I think we could do a good job of this. And then especially there wasn't many fruit beers, there wasn't many sour beers, which has come to be, maybe not as huge surprise now, but like that was kind of our plan going forward, is like make this stuff that other people aren't making. So now like our blueberry sour is like half our production. It's a really tasty beer, and
it's half your production?
Yeah,
Wow.
approximately. Yeah. It changes seasonally, but this past summer that was it. Yeah.
Cool. Going from idea to finding a space, where does the name come from? Or like, what is the next step in terms of opening doors kind of thing? But like, obviously finding a brewer who's going to be able to make beer at scale. You had done some home brew, so you kind of knew that process. But where did the name and like how much effort goes into branding before you're opening doors?
Yeah, definitely a lot. Yes, with names, like it took a while. I think it was getting to the point where it was like impeding our progress, because we're like, we can't totally. Or don't want to like register our company with some random name, because then we're stuck with that random name. So we wanted to, get it nailed down. But it took us, I think, like 6 months to really finalize our name, because, you don't want to change that, right, once you have it. So for us, we had, basically we would just like make huge lists and then like periodically cross off the bad ones and like try and, like get it down to, a few or just a name. Mariner really stuck for us. It was initially on the list because it's the name of a street in Coquitlam, Mariner Way. But really, we were thinking about what we wanted to do with a brewery. Like, why are we opening a brewery? What is this brewery even about, right? And for us, it's a lot about like, about creating new beers that aren't out there, being experimental, but also, refined and precise in what we do, right? Like, you can always get new beers from Mariner, and they're always kind of interesting, usually kind of cutting edge beers, but they're also really well put together. So we wanted something that kind of, fit with that, right? Like, what is both experimental, but also, also, well put together and well done. So the name Mariner really stuck with us because initially of the Mariner space missions in the 60s, they were, out there like trying to chart new planets and new stars, really, like exploring territory unknown, which is one of our slogans now. But they're also, like it's science driven and it's space exploration. Like it's not random, like you're looking for stuff and it's cool and new, but it's really organized. So that kind of stuck with us. And also, the spirit of a mariner, like traditionally a mariner is someone who, who navigates like the sea, right? They're using boats, but, they navigate by the stars, they're exploring, but they have like a course in mind and that sort of thing. So, that really, coalesced into the concept of mariner. And we have, a few slogans now, like I said, explore territory unknown and set no path, never be lost. Which really embodies that concept. And I think it comes across in the beers we do. I'd also say like, I always think we can be doing more to communicate our brand and have a more like fulsome connected brand. So it's always evolving as we do, but that's where it started.
Carl, you're not going to remember this, but my grade 12 grad quote was, I can't remember the exact wording.
Do you remember it?
It was something like, don't go where the path may lead. Instead, create your own something. Mm-hmm. But I was looking at your website today, and the one you said second, whatever it was, it was like something about creating your own path. Anyway,
yeah.
So it's like, grade 12 grad quote. Here we go. We're gonna have something in common. I like it. Beer wise, well, those first 2 years. What were like the biggest unknowns in terms of one, running a business for the first time, but just getting the doors open? I know the liquor board in BC is not the most friendly to work with. There's a lot of red tape that you kind of got to go through in terms of, did you have any hiccups that way too?
Sort of, but I think they were super minor compared to a lot of other breweries. And I think that's basically because my previous job was as a government regulator.
Okay,
so enough. Dealing with government regulators, I was like, I know what you want and I know how I can, basically get there, or, make it look like we're there, or like show you what you need to see, that sort of thing. So, we really didn't have too much trouble with the regulations. I'd say it's more like once the doors are open, this is an operating business. I'd never been like an operations manager before, and suddenly there's like all this stuff going on, and we're, canning a beer doesn't seem like that complicated when you've got like a professional brewer and stuff, but then you realize, okay, we want to do this 2 or 3 times a month, and we got to then distribute it all over and stuff like that. So I think the startup for us was actually fairly smooth, but the first year of operations was it was hectic, and we learned a ton, and I think we did really well. But I just can't believe like how much we had to learn in that first year.
What was the timeline like from like concept phase to actually opening doors?
It was 18 months. So
okay. That's pretty quick, isn't it?
It was pretty quick. Yeah. Yeah. I project managed the heck out of the permits and everything. So it went, I think really about as quick as we could have.
First year of operations, you said it was a big learning curve.
Yeah.
What were some of those things that you either didn't know going in or were just, I don't know, what were those big learning curves year one?
Yeah, I think for me, a big one was just kind of like what everyone's role would look like on a day-to-day basis.
Sure.
Like we kind of knew like what our areas of responsibilities were, but we had no idea like how long certain tasks would take over others, or like, what your day might look like if something goes wrong or misses a schedule or something. So a lot of that kind of stuff, like, just figuring out like how I spend my day and like what is a normal day, when everything is new. So really a lot of that was kind of through trial and error, like, just trying to get everything done, and then, trying to document how long stuff takes, and, what are the recurring things that we do, like weekly or monthly or quarterly, that sort of thing. Definitely, I think like the one topic area that, that was the biggest surprise to me is like how important it is to just like talk to your team all the time. Like know how everyone's doing, what they're coming into work with and without, and, how they feel about what they're doing, how much they want to know about other aspects, and, and how much they want to know about the background of their work, and like all this stuff. And, just like what it takes to keep a team like cohesive and feeling confident and capable and all that.
Totally. I listened to a lot of podcasts, but one of the cool things I've learned from listening to people talking about managing other people is just people are motivated differently. Some people it's money, some people it's schedule, some people it's time off, vacation time, whatever it is. Some people it's just feeling valued and seeing that positive message go out, being like, that was a great job you did on that specific project or whatever it is. So in my business, I've taken a lot more effort into understanding what is important to people. Just kind of the same thing that you just kind of mentioned there. But it is a big learning curve when you go from working for yourself or working as an employee to now owning a business and having employees, in terms of like, how do you motivate people? How do you get them to show up every day and have a smile on their face and treat customers well and all that kind of stuff? Yeah. Totally. That was a big learning curve for me too.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's it's the kind of thing too you can never say like, oh, like I know everything I need to know too. Yeah. So it's I found that pretty interesting, and now a couple of years into it, pretty satisfying to see how much we have learned and how much we're still learning about the people we work with, and how to motivate them.
Going into opening doors, what was the, let's say, percentage of effort into building a brand and logo and getting that out there versus like perfecting a few core beers?
I think it was probably about probably 60 or 70% on the beers and 30 or 40% on like the branding and marketing behind it.
Did you have an idea of like what beers you wanted to have? Let's say I wanted to have one lager, one hazy IPA, one whatever.
Yeah, that was basically it. Yeah. Okay. So we're like one lager or lager type beer, one hazy IPA. And then the other two, we ended up having an opening or an amber ale and a Berliner Weiss. So we basically picked 4 beers, and we knew we would be doing a lot of like changing and experimenting. So we weren't really like married to those recipes or styles. We wanted to open with good beer that was well made, and then, kind of see where it went from there. So in that sense, like, we did a few pilot batches and things, but then really we just started like gathering feedback, looking at new recipes, and basically, as soon as we would, close to sell through one batch, we'd make like the new next interesting thing. Of the beers we opened our doors with, we only make one of them now. So that's our Polaris Northeast IPA, and that's changed like a bunch along the way.
That's the only one, eh?
Yeah, that's the only one. Yeah, I would say I mean, yeah, on one hand, I'm kind of like, ah, dang, like maybe we could have done better early on, but no, like I think, like we opened with really cool beers. They were well made. And then since then, I would say like our stuff has just got better, which is great, right? So every new beer we come out with, I'm really excited about, and it's usually better than the previous ones, in my opinion, at least. So, yeah, so we're not, I guess not really tied to anything in terms of beer styles.
Did you have any bad reviews? I always ask, like, I want to know about that, or more so in terms of like how you handle a bad review kind of thing. Maybe it wasn't bad, but maybe people had this one specific beer and were just like, it's not my thing.
Yeah, I think, well, those are the ones that are more challenging to deal with, right? Because if someone like passionately hates something, there's usually something that you can kind of point to as like, okay, they really hate like chocolate or they hate whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, when people are just meh on stuff, like that's kind of tricky. So, yeah, I mean, early on, like we made a Berliner Weiss that was good, and that it's just like, it's a sour wheat beer. Ours was around 4.5%. But like no one makes those anymore because everyone would rather have a fruit sour, which is kind of the same thing, but with like a different fruit in it.
Sure.
So yeah, we learned pretty quick that like if something isn't interesting enough, like just like turn it up, do something new, put a twist on it. So yeah.
On the like business side, the managerial side, hiring is difficult.
Mm-hmm.
How did those first like few hires go? Or where do you learn types of questions to ask in interviews and stuff like that? Or is it more just gut feel in those interviews? Because I know some people are super structured in interviews, and I'm not that at all.
Yeah.
For me, it's more gut feel.
Yeah.
Do I connect with someone? Do I think they're going to communicate well to our client base type of thing? Versus like, do they say the right thing? Do they have the right education? Is not that important to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think that's something, I think we started pretty organized, wanting to be like, really professional, really on top of it, maybe more like quantified so we could compare things.
Yeah.
But really the way we've kind of do things now is, really, I'd say a lot on gut feel, like someone's attitude and like, do they just seem to like get it? Like I'm doing air quotes here. Like, do they get it? Like, do they, for us, that's kind of turned out to be like, how are they familiar with small business? Do they know like, if they've only worked in like $50 million plus companies, that's a lot different than our company that, is like an order of magnitude or less smaller. So like that kind of thing really goes a long way. Also, I think we've definitely come to rely more on experience. I think initially we hired for, I wouldn't say hired for potential, but like, we looked at more like, what do we feel this person can achieve instead of what have they done in the past that they have a proven ability to do. And I think that really can't be overlooked. I think maybe especially in our case, like for me not having a background in beer and heading this company, I'm not the subject matter expert on all these things. So we really need people that are. We definitely found that early on with our brewer, Kevin. As I mentioned, he's got like more than a decade experience making beer. And there's really no substitute for that on certain topics. So, I definitely hire, like to sum it up, like basically gut feeling and experience. Like, does it seem like you could just be a great team member, and have you done the things you're going to do?
Should we start another beer?
Yeah, I think we should.
What should we go to?
Okay. Well, we just had the Odyssey Hazy IPA. I think we should try our other Hazy IPA. So this is the one we make year round, the Polaris Hazy Northeast IPA. So compared to the one we just had, it's a little more like tropical fruit flavors instead of kind of floral and piney. So it's got like some kind of guava, mango type flavors. But overall is approximately the same style as the last beer.
I think I'm going to like this one based on that description.
Always.
It smells amazing. Is there any dragon fruit in here? No, I'm just kidding. It's just like that super tropical smell, right?
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes I wonder, I'm like, guavas aren't that expensive, but some of these guava smelling hops are. Why don't we just throw guavas in all our beers or, some of these beers? So, hops are pretty interesting though. And there's a lot of flavors that come through in this.
What is this one called again?
This is our Polaris Hazy Northeast IPA. So this is one of the 3 core beers we have that we make year round. Second to the Blueberry Sour. It's our most popular beer.
Super good, people. Super good. Very hazy, very fruity end to the beer. I like it a lot. What do you want people to see when they, or what do you want people to remember from Mariner? What do you want the brand to represent?
Yeah, so as like when I talked about the name a bit and excuse me, kind of our backstory. Yeah, like really what we want people to remember is that the beer is really good.
Totally.
Like that's number one for us. If I have any gripe about the beer industry, it's that people don't pay enough attention to the beer. The liquid is most important in my opinion. Mm-hmm. Like label maybe sells a beer, but like, in terms of what makes a good beer, it should be the beer. So yeah, I think that's what I want people to remember is that the beer was well made. It was tasty. Hopefully they liked it. If it was the style they like. And then next to that is really, what identifies our brand is that it's kind of maybe new, cutting edge, or a bit experimental. Sometimes though, that means just like making a classic style that no one is making. Like the next beer that we might try is our Afterglow Brown Ale. And like, we're really wondering, like, should we call it a brown ale? Like, that's not interesting. It's a brown ale. Like, there's really not much to go on there, but it's delicious. Like we made it, with Tom at Fawcett malt, which is a great English maltster. It just has a ton of flavor. It's really classic beer style, well done. And in a sea of hazy IPAs out there right now, like a delicious brown ale is kind of experimental, I guess.
Totally. You mentioned like you want to stand out in terms of like what people should be looking for in terms of good quality beer. But what is the consumer looking at that is not good quality? And not so much like not good quality beer, but what are they looking at other than the beer?
Well, I mean, like when you go into a liquor store, like you're not choosing what you buy based on like blind taste tests. Sure. That would, I wouldn't say be ideal, but like you probably end up buying like a more preferred beer. But really, you're buying based on the label and like plus whatever about reputation and beer. Exactly. Totally. Yeah. So, I think with the number of seasonals that like a lot of breweries are putting out now, that means there's like a ton of different labels on the shelves. And, I think sometimes it kind of comes down to like, which artwork do I like? And I think on one of the previous episodes, you mentioned, if I've got two hazy IPAs in my hand, which one, one of them's got a cooler label, like that's the one you're getting, right? And like that makes sense too, right? Like because you're judging, you're assuming that the brewery is putting as much care into the packaging as they are into the beer, and that makes sense, right? If the packaging looks like crap, like the beer's probably not that well made, honestly. But at the same time, that can kind of steer people wrong too, right? Yeah. Because if you put crap beer in amazing packaging, it'll still sell, but then everyone will be kind of bummed about it, or except the person making it, I guess. But so I think, it's tricky. Like with so many new breweries opening, there's really no way to know like what beer is great, except for like over time, it'll come to bear, right? People will return to the breweries that they like the beer from, and they will buy less from the breweries that they don't like the beer from, regardless of packaging. But in the meantime, it's kind of this fight for attention based on like, colorful things and like how big your name is, and do you use like metallic or raised things on the shrink sleeves and like all this stuff that like helps on the shelf, but might not help the beer or doesn't help the beer.
I guess, how do you represent the quality to a consumer who doesn't necessarily know you, who's never heard of Mariner before, and is looking at those two cans? The label is really the only thing,
yeah, exactly. Right? Yeah, it is. Yeah. So, and don't get me wrong, like we put a lot of thought into our labels and to the names of our beer. I'm just constantly amazed and impressed by the design company we work with that has, helped us from day one make our vision, have like a visual and a textual reality, in terms of cans and packaging. And I'm looking right now at one of the box trays that carries our cans. Like it all has to be, branded and fit together and tie together. And that's super important because like you say, that is how we communicate it to our customers. Like if the packaging is well made, before you open it, you hopefully think that the beer is well made too.
Sure.
The problem comes in where, if maybe the sales team spends time on the packaging and that sort of thing, but then someone says, well, like just use that cheaper malt, that's fine too. And then the beer's not as good maybe, right? So I think it all has to match, and it can be confusing sometimes when you've got not good beers and great packaging, or great beers and bad packaging. That happens, just as often, which is unfortunate. So, yeah. It's tricky.
That's why we love the design team, Carl.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you would advise a consumer to look at if they have two beers that are whatever, pale ales, pilsners, lagers, whatever, from two different breweries that they've never heard of? How do they make the decision? If it was me, I'd just get both and try them both.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good way. A lot of places sell single cans now too, right?
Totally.
That's like, it's like a $5 or less commitment. That's not too bad. Yeah, I mean, next to that, like maybe look at, like, I hate to say it, but like, if you wanted to do it quickly, maybe look at like the overall Untapped score of the brewery would give you some idea. Like, but at the same time, that's just like, I guess you take it with a grain of salt because it's just, public opinion or
reviews,
like I guess popular vote in that sense, right? Like it's, awards kind of help, but really that's more often about like, how much does it meet the textbook definition of that style and how long has that brewery been around to accrue those awards?
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I would say like probably your best bet honestly is just like talk to people, like, text your buddy who likes craft beer or like go to a bar that sells a lot of it and ask them what's popular, like, and that'll, give you a starting place, and then try a lot of different beers as well and see what you like. Cause, yeah, I definitely have some friends who like breweries that I don't, and vice versa. And like, that's the cool part of craft beers. It's all, subjective. It's what you want to get out of it.
On that note, interesting that you say Twin Sails. And not that I have anything against Twin Sails, but in terms of Brewers Row, they're not my top choice for beer. And maybe I need to try more. But I guess the last few times I've been there, not that Twin Sails gives a shit about my opinion, but my thoughts have just been like decent. Whereas I'm a pretty big fan of Moody. I really like what Moody does.
I agree.
And they switch it up all the time, which is exciting for me who likes to try something different every time I go there. And then they have bakery next door now, which is just doing like a bunch of crazy wild shit.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. I think I had a what did I have? Rosemary Saison or something like that last time I was there.
That sounds good.
It was super interesting.
I keep hearing people talk about the carrot beer. People seem to either love or hate the carrot beer. I don't remember what style it is, but it's got carrots.
They don't have it anymore.
Oh, okay.
I was there
maybe
two weekends ago maybe, and they didn't have it. But I think the first time I went there, they had it. I can't remember how I had it or not. Anyway, they do a bunch of really random stuff, which is cool.
Yeah. Yeah, the guys at Moody do a great job, in my opinion. I think they really know, I would say they really know what they're doing, basically, right? They make some beers that, well, they make all the beers, basically, right? So they run the bakery, which has all these crazy new sours with lots of interesting adjuncts and, and also like some classic stuff. And then they have, they have a really well-made brown ale, for example, and they have really good IPAs. But then they also have like a value brand lager, and like I would say like they really kind of know what they're about. You can get pretty much what you want to get there. Which is really cool. I think they do a better job than others of having, like broad beers. Like if you could only buy beers from Moody Ales, like I think pretty much everyone could find something they like, which you definitely can't say about a lot of breweries, but also some breweries don't intend to do that. I mean, with Twin Sails, like they do make tasty beers. And they do a lot of interesting stuff, but also, like I said, even like kind of regardless of the liquid, like whatever your opinion on that, like I mentioned, like people look to them, like, after like they swept the BC Beer Awards IPA category, things like that, people look to them to see what is new and cutting edge with IPA. So to some extent, like they define like a bit of the category, right? So
totally.
Even if someone doesn't like it, like you got to know what they're doing, kind of. Or that's my opinion as someone making beers as well.
Do you think the consumer looks at those awards though?
I mean, people look. I think everyone kind of has their own concept
Where
of
do
how
they look,
important they
though?
are. Well, often it's on the can or the packaging.
Right. Okay.
Or they're like in the tasting room and you see a row of trophies and it's impressive, even if you don't know what they are.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't think they're that important. It's kind of more about like, it was that can on that day that the judges ranked it, right? Which sometimes means that the judges recognized that beer and they liked it 2 months ago when it came out, and they're like, oh, like that's tasty IPA from Twin Sails. Like,
and I think what you said about fitting the criteria of the award, doesn't necessarily produce the best tasting beer, or the most consumer friendly beer. Right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. Like it's ranked too, and I mean, our beers have fallen to this as well. So, like for example, our blueberry sour, we keep entering in the fruit beer category, and we keep getting beat out by these like multi-year like barrel aged fruit sours that are like so much more complex and they have so much more going on. But like they release like 100 liters a year, whereas like this blueberry sour, like we make tens of thousands of liters a month. You can get it all around. It's really tasty, but it's totally different. Like the intent of it is just totally different than like these, complex aged sours, but yet they're all judged against the fruit beer criteria, which is like, 8 points on what a fruit beer should taste like.
And probably the amount of people that it appeals to would be very different too, right?
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of the normal consumer can't pick out a beer that has been aged for 8 years versus...
Well, or they'll taste it and they'll be like, oh, what the hell? Because it tastes kind of like leather and like has some barnyard flavors, but like... it's like a, a peated scotch or something compared to, something more simple that you would maybe buy on a regular basis, right? Like they have different intentions behind them. So I think, like awards, just like, Google reviews, just like Untapped reviews, like it's context dependent. Probably best bet is to talk to someone who knows beer a bit or like, like there's so much beer knowledge around. Like I think for anyone in a liquor store, like you could probably ask any liquor store staff and get like pretty solid opinion on like, what to buy.
Totally. A lot of people that drink a lot of beer probably.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's more than 200 breweries now. Is that what you said?
I think BC. It might have been 195. I might have exaggerated that, but it's basically
around
200 plus or minus 5 or 10.
Is that an intimidating figure? In terms of like how saturated can craft beer in BC get?
Yeah, it's a weird time to be running a brewery, I'll be honest. So, overall, like there's a lot of breweries that their sales and volume shrunk last year. There's this big report that comes out once a year where the LDB like tells you how like the dollar value of all the beer that breweries sell. So you can kind of get an idea like how big people are. Some of them, it's wild. They're still growing, like almost doubling every year. But a lot of breweries that, we might assume as consumers are growing are in fact not. And I think that, is, it kind of speaks to how many, new players are entering and how, if you look at overall beer consumption in BC, it's going down slightly. Craft is still growing. Okay. As we kind of win customers over from macro beer. But overall, production is outpacing sales, and it's kind of, without getting into too many like statistics and the economics of it, there's a lot of beer out there and a lot of breweries out there. So I think that's why we're seeing so many breweries come out with new beers. It's partly because they're delicious, but also partly because they get people's attention, right? Sure. Like if something's new and has a great label, people notice. And they'll try it. There's a lot of breweries. They're also nowadays they're kind of tending more towards like small community focused breweries.
Totally.
Like I met the team from, I might get this wrong, something chicken brewing, Angry Hen. No, I might get that wrong. In Caslow, BC. Okay. It's a new small local brewery. It's more like the nanoscale than the micro scale. Okay. But like they're doing well. Like the community loves them. They're making like beer for people in their town that want to like drink their beer and support the brewery. Like it's going really well. And, they're not like, another big production brewery opening in Vancouver trying to, like take over the world or whatever we're all trying to do.
Is that a sustainable business model?
It really can be. Yeah.
The small community brewery, not focused on distribution, just wanting to produce beer for that.
Yeah, I would say that, overall might be the more sustainable model. Like really, if you look at the margins, if you can sell beer at, $6 a glass compared to like $2 a can, which is the same size as glass, on the wholesale market, like that makes a lot of sense, right? So if you kind of scale the whole overhead and back end down, and sell most things through your tasting room, that can work really well. In the US, that's, I wouldn't say they're ahead of us. Like they've got a pretty different market down there, which is the number of people and cities and that sort of thing. But there's a lot of places that basically run like brew pub chains, more or less, where they're, they brew their beer on site but they maybe have like 5 locations and like 90% of their sales are through the tasting room. And there's kind of everything in between too. Like Modern Times is another brewery I look at a lot, and they have, I think, 3 or 4 tasting room locations now. And they have like mini golf at their locations and all sorts of cool stuff. And it's just like, they have a place called like Leisureland. You go down there, you hang out, you have some beers, some food, play some mini golf. And like, like it's not hard to see how that's like a really bomb ass idea. That sounds like an awesome afternoon. So, I think breweries are getting more creative in how they structure and what their focus is. But I think a lot of people in BC are still focused on volume and like growth as like the place to be, but that's not necessarily, like the best way to make the best beer, I might say.
That whole customer experience thing, like having a mini golf course in a brewery, that would be pretty cool. But it just doesn't even make sense in Greater Vancouver because it's so expensive. Space is so expensive, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Like you can't lease a 50,000 square foot warehouse and have a mini golf course in it because it would just cost too much money and you wouldn't be able to sell enough beer to pay for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot you can do though. Like right now, it's kind of early, but like, I guess I'll talk about it. So Mariner, we have like this renovation plan we're doing. We're basically opening up like a bit more space in our tasting room.
Cool.
And we're trying to think of, what else can we do besides put tables and chairs there? Like that's interesting. Sure. You can come sit down and have a beer, but like people like to do other things. They like to, a couple of things we've come up with is like, why not a couple arcade games? And what if we put in a projector in there so we could have like a weekly video game tournament or something? Or what if we have like, one of those like book exchange things where people can like, take and leave a book and we, keep it rolling. So I think, there's a lot of reasons that people want like a community hub and like a place where they can come do, various activities, including having beer and food. And I think breweries are, kind of slowly, understanding that like the people, I think a lot of the reason people are coming down to breweries is to try the beer, but it's also because it's cool, a new, interesting way to hang out with your friends. Right. But, maybe once you've tried like 10,000 hazy IPAs 5 years from now, we'll all be thinking, well, like, I want another hazy IPA still, but like, I'd love to play some mini golf with it. Which brewery has a mini golf, of course. So I don't think we'll ever get a mini golf course, but you never know.
That's a cool thing that Fieldhouse has, right? Is they have that big outdoor space where they have cornhole and like whatever they want out there.
Yeah, they are literally now a field house because they put the field in front of them and there's like that house, vaguely house-shaped building there. So.
But just in like Vancouver proper or even in a close suburb of Vancouver, it's unrealistic just based on size of property, really, right?
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, at the same time, you have places like Colony that has, all the games they do and things like that. And they're not a brewery, but like they're, right in Granville's entertainment district and stuff. So, I don't know. I would say anything's on the table at this point for breweries.
Most breweries don't have food.
Yeah.
It's different licensing, obviously.
Sort of. That's a bit of a misconception. Yeah. Okay. It might depend where you are. For us, the only difference is our health inspector also inspects our kitchen instead of just our bar. But it's the same number of licenses. We're not dealing with any more people than we otherwise would.
Interesting. Okay.
It might be a little different in Vancouver, but
I thought like tasting room license was different than like, I don't know the terminology, but restaurant license of being able to do food as well. No, maybe you're...
No, not for us. Like once you have your lounge endorsement, which is the thing that allows you to sell more than one beer a day per person, which most breweries now have.
Right.
Once you have that, you're just kind of considered like a liquor primary vendor. They in fact make you have some food options available. Right. You have to have either like at least like chips and like sausage or something like that. But then besides that, it's up to either like Vancouver Coastal Health or Fraser Health, depending where you are.
So is it more just the aspect of having a kitchen is one more staff, but it takes up more space in the brewery?
I think it's space. Honestly, I think it's mostly the complexity of like, it's kind of like a separate business, right? You're essentially running a small restaurant with, within your other business. So, like it took us a while to kind of get a handle on ours, but, now that it's up and running, it goes pretty smoothly. So
do you see that as more breweries jumping on board with?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I would think so. Like, so for example, for us, once we introduced, it's kind of like 4 or 5 key items on our menu that like are like tasty, savory, hot dishes. Our beer sales went up like 25%. So it was like not hard to see that like people were leaving because they were hungry. Totally. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like, once you've had 2 beers and nothing to eat, like, may or may not drive home. So, but if people can, order like chicken wings or like a, big hot dog or something like that, like a lot of them will stick around more. And they'll also get to try, like food beer pairings can tie in together. Maybe, in addition, like we do some kind of like new and seasonal food items too. Not like a ton, like we're not a full restaurant by any means, but like, for example, we're having an Oktoberfest theme party this Friday, and we're serving bratwurst with like onion jam and a cabbage salad, and it goes perfectly with a pint of lager, and like, that's a pretty good pairing. So I think it's, just kind of another way for breweries to be creative. And I think more we'll get kitchens. I keep seeing Brewers Row bring in like, they started with food trucks. Now they're doing like food pop-ups within the brewery, and there's like Parkside does like regular brunch and stuff. So I think they're getting there. It's probably harder in Vancouver when there's already like lots of really good restaurants in walking distance and stuff. But certainly in the Tri-Cities and out towards the Valley and then the rest of BC, I think it makes a lot of sense.
Okay, let's try one more. I'm super excited about this brown ale, by the way.
Oh, cool.
I had one recently. Where was I, Carl? Where was I like 4 days ago? I had a really good brown ale.
Was it on the island somewhere?
Carl, you don't know my schedule?
There's not too many. So it could have been Moody Ales. They have their Hardy Brown Ale. Or it could have been the Narragansett Nut Brown if you were at Cannery Brewing.
Red Arrow.
Red Arrow. I told you it was on the island.
Nice.
Okay, I was at Red Arrow. That's where it was. It was like a really, I don't know. I don't super love brown ales, or at least what I think are brown ales, because they taste like molasses to me.
Yeah, they got a bit of that, yeah.
But this one from Red Arrow, props, because that was a good beer, was more like a little bit sweeter, a little bit more like toffee aftertaste.
That sounds good.
Which was delicious, actually. Carl, try that one. Oh, you did?
It was delicious.
Well,
yeah.
fuck you then, Carl.
That was my opener, baby.
Was it?
Yeah.
Feel free to use Carl's beer. What
are
are we drinking this one?
So this is our Afterglow Brown Ale. So so I mentioned it earlier. So we use all like Thomas Ferris malts. We use a base of Maris Otter, which is like a really like rich, good quality English malt, which really means that it's a very classic style. We haven't done anything too out of the box with the recipe, but we've really used the best ingredients and the best process we can to try and make a really rich, tasty brown ale.
I've had one sip so far, and the best way for me to describe this is it tastes like a coffee crisp.
Yeah, it does have a lot of those flavors. Yeah,
it's not so much chocolatey. It almost, I don't know what the combination of that cookie thing inside the coffee crisp.
It's like roasted and biscuity, I might say. Like it's
biscuity.
Yeah.
It's delicious.
I really like this beer. Yeah, it's well suited for this kind of year. It was rainy today, which was, kind of perfect
ugly this morning,
weather.
totally.
But there's a beautiful sunset we're staring at now.
Almost. Probably 10 minutes away. Got great sunsets here, Carl. Should do sunset podcast. Let's kind of wrap up, but let's wrap up with like, what does the future of craft beer in BC look like in your wild, crazy imagination? And I guess like, what is the number where it kind of evens out and stops expanding? Because 200 craft breweries in BC sounds like a lot to me.
Yeah, that is a lot. I think it might go up to like 230. I'd be surprised if there was more than 250, unless like, 30 to 50 of those were just like really tiny places.
Sure.
The future of craft beer, I think it's going to be more of the same if you look at the same as being like new stuff all the time. Mm-hmm. So it's going to like, there's so many breweries now. We're all trying to make the best beer. Or at least I hope we are. That's certainly what Mariner is doing. So we're all trying to make, new beer, the best beer. And, what that means is that we're kind of always, to some degree, trying new things, being experimental. So I think we'll continue to see, like new stuff all the time. I think right now we're I wouldn't say we've hit like peak hazy. Maybe we have, but like they're going to keep growing for probably a decade. Sure. Like hazy IPAs are just delicious. So we're going to see lots of those. Same with fruit sours. I think we've kind of seen most of the boom there. And I think now, the best ones will kind of stick around and there'll be people who like those regularly. But, some of the ones that were just kind of, done because it's new will probably not be done so much. And then I think we'll see a big trend in like kind of like lighter beers, not light beers, but like like I don't know if you guys have seen the Bridge Primetime beer. It's like low carb, low calorie, but it's dry hopped quite heavily. So it's actually, like for people, I have a lot of friends not a lot of friends, but like a few friends on keto or who are, like big into fitness and that sort of thing, who are like, I love craft beer, but like I just can't drink like big milkshake IPAs, or like I like hops, but like not gonna have that 12% IPA, like stuff like that. So. Totally. And like that makes sense, right? Like I definitely want those beers to exist, and I'm probably going to still try them. But like I totally get where people are coming from when they say they want lighter stuff. I think we've seen a lot of things like the nudes and neutrals, like the vodka sodas, have grabbed a lot of people's attention because they taste pretty good, and like they don't taste very heavy. They're pretty light, and they're like keto friendly, I think. Some of them are gluten-free. So I think we'll see, breweries kind of recognize that, like the cool thing about beer is it only takes like a few weeks to a month to produce, and it can taste like so many different things with the hops and malts and fruits you can put into it. So I think what we'll see with beer is it kind of follow like general consumer trends, which is going to be hazies are delicious, fruit sours also delicious, but mostly the good ones. Lighter beers, really good when they're still full flavored. So like the, good quality lighter beers, like, I don't know, like Primetime is pretty good. I think Stanley Park came out with like a keto friendly lager or something like that. I think it's called like electric lager. But yeah, so I think we'll start to see a bit of a surge of those, and lagers come back because they can be complex and interesting, but like not so heavy. And I think, there'll still be more breweries opening. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a few breweries close in the next year or so. But yeah, I think it's a great time to be a consumer. Like there's so much good beer out there. And yeah, every time, I'm, wondering what beer I should try, there's so many options that look great and probably taste great if I could try them all. So I think it's a really cool time for craft beer.
Talking about health, do you think breweries start advertising calories if they're producing these, like, let's say lower alcohol type beers that are less calories?
Yeah, I think like if that's your target, right? And
like a McDonald's, now has like, whatever, Big Mac, X amount of calories.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's going to get, or maybe a few people, but I think most breweries won't get like all their beers tested. But if there's a beer that they know is pretty low in calories, like makes sense to maybe put that on the can. Especially if it's like on the back or done, tastefully. I don't think it's going to offend anyone, but there's definitely people that are interested. Like we get asked on a daily basis which beers are gluten-free, if any. Unfortunately, the answer is no. Which ones are vegan? Which ones are low carb? Where we are in the Tri-Cities, there's a lot of people, that like craft beer. They want a place to go, but they're just like not going to drink a 900 calorie can or whatever some of them are.
Is it difficult as a brewery owner to stay in shape?
It can be.
I've always wanted to ask that question.
Oh, it is. Yeah. So,
and you're very thin, so I feel like you're the right person to ask.
I just race around all day. That's how I do it. I eat a lot and have a fair bit of beer too. It can be tricky. Like especially if you're like on the sales side of things, I would say, or doing the festival circuit, like holy cow, like Whistler Beer Fest, like I had to stay in one night. It was so much. So it can like, but I think anyone who's kind of been doing it a couple of years, like you kind of get it. Everyone's pretty supportive too. Like, there's no harm, no harm in saying no, or there's no harm in like staying in, one day of a 3-day festival or whatever. I think people are, they recognize that, you don't want to go overboard, and that doesn't help anyone. It can be tricky, but I think once you kind of done it a couple of years, you kind of get a grasp on it.
You figure out some sort of balance.
Yeah, exactly. Totally. I wouldn't say the best balance, but some sort of balance. Yeah.
Love it. Thanks so much for coming on, man. That was a lot of fun.
Thanks for having me.
I am very impressed. If I'm totally honest, I have not had a Mariner beer until tonight, but I was pretty impressed. The Northwest Hazy was delicious. That was probably my favorite. And then this one was probably number 2. Nice. This is called Afterglow.
Afterglow Brown Ale. Yeah.
I like that. This is a good fall beer to me.
A solid beer. Very good.
Is this is a seasonal?
That's right. Yeah. It'll be around for probably another month.
Check it out. Orange and red can. Where can people find Mariner?
Really all over Metro Vancouver, particularly focused, I would say, on like downtown, East Van, and Tri-Cities. So probably just about any of the private liquor stores have like our current seasonals, and about half the government liquor stores. You can also feel free to give the brewery a call or send us a message on Instagram with your neighborhood. We'll let you know where you can get it.
Beautiful. Thanks, man. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, cheers.